My name is Alyssa Turner, 29 years old, and until last month my career at Meridian Labs was everything I had worked for. 5 years as a research specialist in one of the country's leading chemical companies, all destroyed in a single morning when someone planted dangerous materials in my workspace during our safety inspection. I was accused, humiliated, and escorted out of the building I once called my second home. Before I tell you how my life fell apart and then came back together, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. And hit that subscribe button if you want more stories about workplace justice. I graduated with a master's degree in chemistry from Northwestern University 7 years ago, and landing a job at Meridian Labs felt like winning the lottery. The company was known for cutting-edge research in industrial chemicals, with clients ranging from pharmaceutical giants to aerospace corporations. Our work required precision attention to detail and strict adherence to safety protocols. One mistake could mean disaster, not just for the company, but potentially for human lives. That's why I took safety so seriously. In 5 years, I had never received a single warning or violation. I triple-checked my work, labeled everything meticulously, and followed every protocol to the letter. My lab notebooks were considered exemplary by the quality assurance team. I even volunteered to conduct safety briefings for new hires. Safety wasn't just a requirement of the job for me. It was a personal value. My dedication hadn't gone unnoticed. 3 weeks before the incident, Thomas Warner, our research director, had called me into his office. He was a tall man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and the kind of penetrating gaze that made you feel like he could see right through any deception. His office walls were lined with patents and scientific awards. "Alyssa, I've been watching your work," he said, leaning back in his chair. "You're thorough, innovative, and you understand the importance of both scientific rigor and safety protocols. The Bristol project is moving into Phase 2 next month, and I'm recommending you to lead the formulation team." The Bristol project was a $20 million contract to develop a new industrial adhesive. It was the kind of opportunity that could make or break careers. I nearly spilled my coffee when he told me. "I'm honored, Dr. Warner," I managed to say, my heart racing with excitement. "Don't thank me yet," he replied with a slight smile. "Patricia will have input on the final decision, and as your direct manager, her recommendation carries significant weight." And there it was, the rain cloud over my sunny moment. Patricia Reynolds had been my manager for the past 3 years, and from day one there had been tension between us. She was in her mid-40s, always impeccably dressed with a perpetual tight smile that never quite reached her eyes. On paper, Patricia was accomplished, a PhD from Princeton, 15 years at Meridian, and a reputation for delivering results no matter what. But her management style was toxic. She played favorites, took credit for subordinates' work, and seemed personally offended by any recognition that came my way. Her golden boy was Raymond Carter, who had joined the company a year after me. Raymond was smart and charming with an easy confidence that won people over quickly. He was good at what he did. I'll give him that, but he also knew exactly how to position himself in Patricia's good graces. "I understand," I told Dr. Warner, trying to hide my concern. "I'll make sure my work continues to speak for itself." "That's all any of us can do," he said, nodding. "The final decisions will be made after the quarterly safety inspection. Barbara Lawrence will be leading it this time, and you know how thorough she is." Barbara Lawrence was Meridian's safety compliance officer, a former OSHA inspector who had been hired to overhaul the company's safety programs after a minor accident 3 years ago. She was feared throughout the building for her uncompromising standards and eagle eye for violations. Even the smallest infraction wouldn't escape her notice. The only person at Meridian I truly trusted was Eleanor Hayes, a fellow researcher who had started around the same time as me. Eleanor was brilliant, outspoken, and the only one who would openly call out Patricia's behavior. We often had lunch together in the small courtyard behind the research building, away from prying eyes and ears. "So I heard Warner is considering you for the Bristol project," Eleanor said the day after my meeting, unwrapping her sandwich. Her curly red hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and her lab coat had a small coffee stain on the collar. Unlike most of us, Eleanor never seemed concerned about appearances. "News travels fast," I replied, surprised. "I just found out yesterday." "The walls have ears," she said with a wink. "And Patricia has been stomping around like someone stole her parking spot. I'm guessing she wanted Raymond for that position." I sighed, picking at my salad. "Warner said she gets input on the final decision." Eleanor's expression grew serious. "Be careful, Alyssa. You know how important the Bristol contract is. There's a lot of money involved, and Patricia always finds a way to get what she wants." What could she possibly do? My work record speaks for itself. Eleanor gave me a look that made my stomach tighten. "Just watch your back. The safety inspection is coming up, and Patricia and Raymond have been having a lot of closed-door meetings lately." I should have taken her warning more seriously. I should have realized that when careers and money were at stake, some people would cross lines I couldn't even imagine. But at that moment, sitting in the sunlight with my friend, I still believed that hard work and integrity would be enough. I had no idea how naive that belief was about to prove. The week before the safety inspection, strange things began happening around my workspace. I first noticed it on Tuesday morning when I arrived at the lab. My computer was on, though I distinctly remembered shutting it down the night before. The molecular modeling program was running, which used significant computing power and was against protocol to leave operating overnight. "That's odd," I murmured to myself, checking the system logs. There was no record of who had logged in, which was even stranger given our secure access protocols. Later that day, I returned from a department meeting to find my desk drawers slightly ajar. Nothing seemed to be missing, but my carefully organized reference materials had been shuffled with some papers out of place. I mentioned it to Eleanor over text. "Probably the cleaning crew," she suggested, but we both knew the cleaning staff had strict instructions never to touch research materials or open drawers. On Thursday, I was working late finalizing some test results before the weekend. The lab was nearly empty, most people having left for the day. As I walked back from the instrument room, I caught a glimpse of someone quickly moving away from the vicinity of my workstation. The figure disappeared around the corner before I could identify them, but the build and gait reminded me of Raymond. When I reached my desk, everything looked normal, but the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I spent an extra hour that evening going through all my materials, making sure everything was properly labeled and stored according to safety regulations. The next morning, Patricia called me into her office. She sat behind her immaculate desk, a sleek, modern piece that matched her precisely styled blonde bob and tailored navy suit. "The safety inspection is on Monday," she said without preamble. "Barbara Lawrence will be particularly focused on chemical storage and documentation this quarter." "I'm ready," I assured her. "My area is fully compliant." Something flickered across Patricia's face, momentary surprise quickly masked. "Are you certain no unlabeled containers, all SDS forms up to date?" "Absolutely," I said confidently. "I did a complete review last night." Patricia leaned forward slightly. "You know how serious safety violations can be, Alyssa. They can end careers, especially for someone being considered for advancement." The threat was thinly veiled but unmistakable. As I left her office, a chill ran down my spine. This wasn't just her usual antagonism. Something felt different, more targeted. I immediately texted Eleanor need to talk. Now. We met in the small reference library on the second floor, a space rarely used since most resources had been digitized. Eleanor listened intently as I described the strange occurrences and my conversation with Patricia. "This isn't paranoia," Eleanor said when I finished. "I overheard Raymond talking to HR yesterday about project reassignments. He seemed very confident he'd be taking over something big next week." "The Bristol project," I breathed, connecting the dots. Eleanor nodded grimly. "There's more. Patricia submitted the preliminary team recommendations yesterday, and I heard your name wasn't on the list at all, not even as a team member." My stomach dropped, but Warner already told me he wanted me to lead it. "Warner recommends, but Patricia has authority over her direct reports. If she can find a legitimate reason to question your reliability." Like a safety violation, I finished feeling sick. "Exactly. And a serious one would not only cost you the Bristol project, it could put your whole position at risk." That evening I stayed late again, going through my workspace with obsessive attention to detail. I checked every container, every label, every form. I reviewed the digital logs for all my experiments. Everything was perfect, exactly as it should be. But as I finally left the building at 9:30, the security guard nodding goodbye, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something important. Over the weekend, I could barely sleep. I kept going over everything in my mind, trying to think if there was any safety protocol I might have overlooked. By Sunday night, I was exhausted, but confident. If someone was trying to set me up, they wouldn't find any legitimate safety issues to use against me. Monday morning arrived with a tense atmosphere throughout the research facility. The quarterly safety inspection wasn't just about individual compliance. Departmental ratings affected bonuses and resource allocations. Everyone was on edge, but no one more than me. I arrived an hour early to do one final check of my area. Everything remained in perfect order. As researchers began filling in, I noticed Raymond and Patricia huddled in her office, their expressions serious, but with an undercurrent of anticipation that made my skin crawl. When Raymond emerged, he caught my eye across the lab and gave me a smile that held no warmth. Eleanor arrived looking worried. "Are you okay?" she asked quietly, setting down her bag. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, forcing confidence into my voice. "Whatever happens today," she said, squeezing my arm, "I've got your back." Little did I know how much I would need that support in the hours to come. At precisely 9 o'clock, Barbara Lawrence arrived with her inspection team. Barbara was a formidable woman in her late 50s, with short gray hair and rectangular glasses that she used to dramatic effect, peering over them to fix rule breakers with her steely gaze. She wore a crisp pantsuit and carried her inspection tablet like a weapon. Thomas Warner met her in the main lab, shaking her hand with the confident smile of a leader who expected his department to pass with flying colors. The room fell silent as Barbara addressed the assembled researchers. "Good morning, everyone. As you know, safety is not just a priority at Meridian Labs, it's a fundamental value. Today's inspection will be thorough. We'll be checking documentation, storage procedures, waste management, and personal safety compliance. Please continue your work as normal and cooperate fully with my team." The inspection began methodically. Barbara's team of 3 split up, each taking different sections of the research floor. I tried to focus on my work running stability tests on a new formulation, but my eyes kept drifting to the inspectors as they made their rounds. Patricia stayed close to Barbara, occasionally pointing things out or offering explanations. Raymond worked at his station, the picture of efficiency and compliance. 2 hours into the inspection, Barbara and her team approached my section. I stood up ready to answer any questions and demonstrate my adherence to protocols. Barbara nodded professionally. "Miss Turner, let's start with your chemical inventory and storage." "Of course," I replied, leading her to my carefully organized storage area. All chemicals are stored according to compatibility groups. Here's my digital inventory, which matches the physical labels. You'll find all safety data sheets linked in the system. Barbara reviewed the information, making notes on her tablet. One of her team members checked my waste containers, while another examined my lab notebook. Everything was proceeding smoothly until Barbara moved to my desk area. "Let's check your workspace drawers," she said, a standard part of the inspection process. "Certainly," I replied, confident there was nothing to find. Barbara opened the top drawer, which contained only office supplies and personal items neatly organized. She made a note and moved to the second drawer, which held reference materials and notebooks. When she opened the bottom drawer, her expression changed immediately. She stepped back and gestured to one of her team members. "Document this," she said sharply, her voice cutting through the murmur of the lab. Conversations died as all eyes turned toward us. I looked down at the open drawer in confusion, then shock. There, nestled among my reference materials, was a small, unlabeled glass bottle containing a pale yellow liquid. Beside it lay a packet of what appeared to be chemical powder with no safety markings or identification. "These were found in your workspace," Barbara said, her voice crisp and professional but edged with severity. She carefully removed the items using gloves and held them up. "Unlabeled hazardous materials stored improperly, without proper containment or documentation." I stared at the items in disbelief. "Those aren't mine," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I've never seen them before." The lab had gone completely silent. I could feel everyone watching the weight of their stares, making it hard to breathe. Patricia stepped forward, her face a mask of professional concern that couldn't quite hide the satisfaction in her eyes. "She's always been somewhat reckless," Patricia said to Barbara, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Brilliant, but sometimes careless about procedures." "That's not true," I protested, my voice growing stronger with indignation. "Someone put those there. I checked that drawer last night, and those items were not there." Barbara's expression remained impassive. "These materials appear to be industrial solvents and potentially reactive compounds stored without proper containment in a personal drawer. This is a serious violation of our safety protocols, Miss Turner." Thomas Warner had joined the group now, his face grave. "Are you certain those aren't research materials you were working with, Alyssa?" he asked, giving me a chance to explain. "Absolutely certain," I insisted. "I would never store unlabeled chemicals. Someone must have planted them there after I checked my workspace last night." Patricia made a small sound of disbelief. "That's quite an accusation, Alyssa. Are you suggesting someone broke into the lab overnight just to plant chemicals in your drawer?" Put that way, it did sound far-fetched. I could see doubt creeping into Warner's expression, and Barbara was already documenting the violation in her tablet. "I need to ask you to step away from this workstation," Barbara said. "This area needs to be secured, and these materials require proper handling and testing." "But my work," I protested. "I have time-sensitive experiments running." "I'll have someone else monitor them," Patricia said smoothly. "Raymond can take over." Raymond stepped forward, the concern on his face betrayed by the gleam in his eyes. "Happy to help," he said. "I'm familiar with Alyssa's current projects." I'm sure he was. "Dr. Warner," Barbara said, turning to the research director, given the nature of this violation. I recommend temporary suspension of lab privileges pending a full investigation. Warner looked at me and I could see he was torn. We had worked together for 5 years and he had always respected my work. But the evidence was literally right in front of him. "I understand," he said finally. "Alyssa, please gather your personal belongings. Security will escort you out, and HR will be in touch about next steps." The humiliation was complete. As a security officer was called to escort me out, I caught Eleanor's eye across the room. She looked horrified, but gave me a small nod that somehow conveyed both support and a promise. I gathered my phone and purse, leaving my laptop, as it was company property. As I was led through the lab past all my colleagues, I held my head high despite the burning in my cheeks and the tightness in my throat. This wasn't over. Someone had set me up and I wasn't going to let them get away with it. 3 hours after being escorted from the building, I found myself sitting in a sterile conference room on the executive floor. Across from me sat Thomas Warner, Barbara Lawrence, and Diane Hughes from Human Resources, a woman I'd only met briefly during my initial hiring. Patricia stood near the window, arms crossed, while a security officer waited by the door. Miss Turner Hughes began her tone professionally. "Detached, the purpose of this meeting is to discuss the safety violation discovered this morning and determine next steps." "Those materials weren't mine," I said immediately. "I've never seen them before, and I believe they were deliberately planted in my workspace." Hughes exchanged glances with Warner. "That's a serious allegation." "It's the truth," I insisted. "I checked that drawer thoroughly last night specifically because I was concerned about the inspection." "Why were you concerned?" Barbara asked, eyebrows raised. "If you follow protocols consistently, an inspection shouldn't cause anxiety." Before I could answer, Patricia spoke up. "Alyssa has been under consideration for a promotion. Perhaps the pressure affected her judgment." I turned to look at her directly. Or perhaps someone wanted to make sure I didn't get that promotion. The tension in the room thickened. Warner cleared his throat. "Regardless of how those materials got there, we have a serious safety issue. Unlabeled chemicals stored improperly create risks for everyone in the lab." "I agree completely," I said, "which is why I would never do such a thing." Barbara consulted her tablet. "The preliminary tests indicate the liquid is a non-approved solvent mixture containing traces of chlorinated compounds. The powder appears to be a reactive catalyst that becomes unstable when exposed to moisture. Together they pose significant hazards." "All the more reason I wouldn't have them in my desk," I pointed out. "It makes no sense." Hughes folded her hands on the table. "At this point, we need to follow protocol. Your lab access and system credentials will be suspended pending a full investigation. We'll need your company phone and ID badge." I handed them over, feeling a strange detachment, as if this were happening to someone else. "How long will the investigation take?" I asked. "At least a week," Hughes replied. "We'll need to review security logs, interview staff, and complete the analysis of the materials found. And in the meantime, my projects I couldn't help but ask, thinking of months of work left in limbo." "Raymond Carter will temporarily oversee your work," Patricia said, not quite managing to hide her satisfaction. "Of course he would." "We'll be in touch," Miss Turner Hughes concluded, rising to signal the end of the meeting. "Please remain available for further questions." The security officer escorted me all the way to the parking garage. As I sat in my car, the full weight of what had happened finally hit me. My reputation, my career, everything I had worked for was in jeopardy. And for what? Because I was good at my job? Because Patricia preferred Raymond? The injustice of it burned like acid. I drove home in a daze, barely registering the familiar streets of my neighborhood. My apartment felt strange, alien almost. I shouldn't be here at 2 in the afternoon on a Monday. I should be in the lab working. I paced restlessly, replaying the morning's events over and over. Who had access to the lab after hours? How had they gotten past security? There were cameras in the hallways, but not in the labs themselves for privacy reasons. Could there be footage of someone entering late at night? The cameras. A small flare of hope ignited in my chest. If someone had entered the lab after hours, there would be a record of it. My phone rang, breaking my train of thought. It was Eleanor calling from her personal cell. "Alyssa, are you okay? What happened?" I gave her a quick summary of the meeting, my voice steadier than I expected. "This is insane," she fumed. "Everyone knows you're the most careful person in the entire lab." "Apparently not everyone," I said bitterly. "Eleanor, I need your help. The security cameras, they might have caught whoever planted those materials." There was a pause on the line. "The cameras are only checked if there's a specific request from management or security, and something tells me Patricia won't be making that request. Then I need to talk to security directly. Who's in charge of the system?" "Frank Mitchell," Eleanor replied. "He's the head of security. Former police detective, been with Meridian about 4 years. He's tough, but fair, from what I've heard." "Do you think he would help me?" "Maybe. He doesn't report to Patricia, at least. He reports directly to operations. But Alyssa, be careful. If Patricia finds out you're investigating..." "What more can she do to me?" I asked. "I've already been escorted out and suspended." "She could make sure you're fired," Eleanor pointed out. "Right now it's just a suspension pending investigation." She was right, but I couldn't just sit and wait for the company's investigation. Not when Patricia would almost certainly be influencing it. "I need to at least try," I said. "Can you get me Frank's contact information?" Eleanor hesitated, then sighed. "I'll text it to you. But please be smart about this." After we hung up, I sat thinking about my approach. I couldn't just accuse Patricia and Raymond without proof. I needed to convince Frank Mitchell to help me find that proof first. I received Eleanor's text with Frank's email and office phone number. Taking a deep breath, I dialed. Security Mitchell speaking. His voice was deep and no nonsense. "Mr. Mitchell, my name is Alyssa Turner. I'm a researcher at Meridian." "I know who you are, Miss Turner," he replied. "I was briefed on this morning's incident." My heart sank. If he already knew, would he even listen to me? "I need to speak with you," I said, deciding directness was my best option. The materials found in my desk were planted there, and I believe security camera footage could prove it. There was a long pause. "That's a serious claim." "It's the truth," I said simply. "Will you hear me out, in person?" Another pause. "I can give you 15 minutes. Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. Use the visitor entrance." "Thank you," I said, relief washing over me. It wasn't much, but it was something, a chance. "Miss Turner," he added before hanging up, just so we're clear, "if you're wasting my time with conspiracy theories, those 15 minutes will be very short indeed." "Understood," I replied. "I'll see you tomorrow morning." After hanging up, I sent a quick text to Eleanor, meeting with Frank tomorrow morning. "Wish me luck." Her reply came moments later. "Be careful. I'll see what else I can find out from here." That night I barely slept. My mind kept cycling through scenarios, rehearsing what I would say to Frank Mitchell, how I would convince him to help me. By the time my alarm went off at 6, I had a plan. I wouldn't make wild accusations or emotional appeals. I would present facts, timeline, discrepancies, and logical reasons why someone would want to sabotage me. And most importantly, I would appeal to his detective background, the desire to find the truth, no matter where it led. As I dressed in a simple professional outfit, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Yesterday I had been in shock, reeling from the injustice. Today I had purpose. Someone had tried to destroy my career, and I wasn't going to let them succeed. At precisely 8 o'clock the next morning, I walked through the visitor entrance of Meridian Labs. The security guard at the desk looked surprised to see me, but called Frank Mitchell as requested. A few minutes later, Frank appeared, an imposing figure with broad shoulders, close-cropped salt and pepper hair, and alert eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "Miss Turner," he said with a curt nod. "This way." He led me to a small office near the security center. Unlike the sleek, modern design of most Meridian spaces, Frank's office was utilitarian: a metal desk, basic chairs, and walls covered with security protocols and building schematics. He gestured for me to sit while he closed the door. "You have 15 minutes, he said, taking his seat behind the desk. "Thank you for seeing me." I began, maintaining eye contact. "I'll get straight to the point. Yesterday, dangerous materials were found in my desk drawer during a safety inspection. I did not put them there. In fact, I had thoroughly checked that drawer the night before, and those items were definitely not present." Frank's expression remained neutral. "Go on." "I believe someone planted those materials after I left Sunday night with the specific intention of damaging my career. I need your help to review the security footage from Sunday evening through Monday morning to see who accessed the research floor during that time." "That's a serious accusation," Frank said, echoing his words from our phone call. "Do you have any idea who might have done this, or why?" This was the moment to be completely candid. I believe it was either Patricia Reynolds, my manager, or Raymond Carter, possibly both of them working together. 3 weeks ago, I was informed by Dr. Warner that I was being considered to lead the Bristol project. Patricia wanted Raymond for that position. The timing of this discovery, just before final decisions were to be made, is extremely convenient. Frank studied me for a long moment. "Even if what you're saying is true, accessing security footage requires proper authorization. I can't just pull it up because you have a hunch." "It's more than a hunch," I countered. "There have been strange occurrences around my workspace for the past week. My computer was turned on when I arrived one morning, though I had shut it down. My papers were rearranged. I even saw someone hurrying away from my desk area one evening, though I couldn't identify who it was." "Did you report these incidents?" "No," I admitted. "At the time, they seemed minor, and I had no proof. Now I realize they were likely part of the setup." Frank leaned back in his chair, considering. "You understand that if I investigate this and find nothing, it could make your situation worse." "I understand. But if I'm right and someone did plant those materials, then it's not just about my career. It's about a serious breach of safety protocols and corporate ethics. The same person who was willing to risk chemical contamination to frame me could do it to someone else in the future." That seemed to strike a chord. Frank's eyes narrowed slightly. "Wait here," he said abruptly, standing up. "I need to check something." He left the office, closing the door behind him. I sat there trying to control my nervous energy. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Had my 15 minutes expired? Was he even coming back? Just as I was considering whether to leave, the door opened, and Frank returned, his expression now grave. "I've reviewed the entry logs for the research floor," he said, sitting down again. There were indeed after-hours entries on Sunday night. Patricia Reynolds accessed the floor at 7:30 p.m. using her security badge. She remained for approximately 45 minutes. My heart raced. That's after I left. I was gone by 6:30. Frank nodded. There's more. Raymond Carter entered at 8:15 p.m. and left at 8:40. Both entries were outside normal working hours, though not technically unauthorized since they have appropriate clearance. Can you check the camera footage to see if they went near my workspace? Frank hesitated, then made a decision. Come with me. He led me to a small room adjacent to his office, filled with monitors showing feeds from various areas of the building. Frank sat at a computer terminal and began typing. I'm accessing archived footage from Sunday evening, he explained. This camera covers the main entrance to the research floor. The screen showed a time-stamped view of the corridor outside the lab. Frank forwarded to 7:30 p.m., and sure enough, Patricia appeared, swiping her badge to enter. At 8:15, Raymond arrived, repeating the process. Can you see inside the lab? I asked. There are only 2 cameras inside for privacy reasons, Frank explained. One covering the main area and one on the equipment room. Neither has a direct view of individual workstations. He switched to the feed from inside the lab. The angle wasn't ideal, but at 7:40 p.m. Patricia could be seen moving toward the area where my workspace was located. She remained there for several minutes out of clear view. When Raymond arrived later, he went directly to the same area. That's not conclusive proof, Frank admitted, but it does show they both went to your section of the lab after hours, when almost no one else was present. Is there any other way to prove they planted the materials? I asked, feeling both vindicated and frustrated. We were so close. Frank thought for a moment. The materials themselves might hold clues. I'll need to check with the safety team about their analysis. He picked up a phone and dialed an extension. After a brief conversation, he hung up and turned to me. Barbara Lawrence is still analyzing the contents, but she did note something interesting. The chemical fingerprint of the liquid matches a specialized solvent used exclusively in Raymond's current project. It's not available to other researchers, without specific requisition. My eyes widened. That's it. He used materials from his own project to set me up. It's circumstantial, Frank cautioned, but adds to the pattern. Let me make another call. This time he called someone in IT security, requesting access logs for the chemical inventory system. After a detailed conversation, he thanked them and hung up. According to the system logs, Raymond accessed the digital chemical inventory on Sunday afternoon and recorded removal of that specific solvent for his project. The amount logged out was 30 milliliters, more than standard protocol recommends for his procedure. Exactly the amount that would fit in that small bottle, I said, the pieces falling into place. Frank nodded slowly. Miss Turner, I think you may be right about being set up. The timing, the after-hours lab accessed the specific chemicals, all point to deliberate action by Patricia and Raymond. Relief washed over me so intensely I had to grip the edge of the desk to steady myself. What happens now? Now, Frank said, standing up. We take this evidence to someone who can act on it. I believe Thomas Warner should see this immediately. Warner 1 hesitated. He seemed to believe I was guilty yesterday. Dr. Warner is fair, Frank assured me. He acts on evidence, and now we have some. But before we proceed, I should tell you something else I discovered while checking records. The Bristol project you mentioned. It's even bigger than you might realize. The company stands to make upwards of $40 million if all phases are successful, with significant bonuses for the team leads. That explains the motivation, I said. Patricia and Raymond didn't just want the prestige. They wanted the money. Frank nodded. Greed is usually the simplest explanation. Let me call Warner's office and see if he's available. While Frank made the call, I tried to process everything. The relief of validation was overwhelming, but it was mixed with anger at the betrayal. Patricia and Raymond had been willing to destroy my career for their own gain. They had violated the safety protocols they claimed to uphold and risked the integrity of the entire research department. Frank hung up the phone. "Dr. Warner can see us immediately. Are you ready to present our findings?" I took a deep breath and stood up. More than ready. As we walked toward the executive floor, I felt a strange sense of calm. The truth was finally coming to light, and whatever happened next, I knew I had fought for myself. No one would take my career from me without a fight. Frank and I were ushered into Thomas Warner's spacious office immediately upon arrival. Warner looked surprised to see me, his eyebrows rising slightly as I entered alongside the head of security. "Miss Turner, Mr. Mitchell," he greeted us, gesturing to the chairs across from his desk. "I understand you have something urgent to discuss." "We do," Frank said, taking the lead. "I've uncovered evidence suggesting the safety violation discovered yesterday was deliberately staged." Warner's expression turned serious. "That's a significant allegation. What evidence do you have?" Frank methodically presented everything we had discovered: the after-hours access logs, the security footage showing Patricia and Raymond in the vicinity of my workspace, the connection between the planted chemicals and Raymond's project, and the excessive amount of solvent he had checked out. As the evidence mounted, Warner's expression shifted from skepticism to concern, and finally to something resembling anger. When Frank finished, Warner remained silent for a moment, processing the information. "If this is accurate," he finally said, "it represents not just a violation of company policy, but potentially criminal behavior. Deliberately mishandling hazardous chemicals puts everyone at risk." "I believe it is accurate," Frank stated confidently. "The digital logs are tamper-proof and the camera footage speaks for itself." Warner turned to me. "Miss Turner, I owe you an apology. I should have considered the possibility of sabotage more seriously." "You had no reason to doubt what you saw," I replied, though part of me wished he had shown more faith in my character and history with the company. Warner picked up his phone. "Janet, please ask Patricia Reynolds and Raymond Carter to come to my office immediately, and contact Diane Hughes in HR. We'll need her present as well." He paused. "Also reach out to CEO Morgan. Explain that we have an urgent situation involving the Bristol project and potential misconduct." My heart raced. Diana Morgan was Meridian's CEO, a legendary figure in the industry known for her brilliant strategic mind and zero tolerance for ethical breaches. This was escalating quickly. "I'd like to set up a brief presentation," Frank said. "May I connect to your display?" Warner nodded, and Frank quickly arranged the evidence files on the large screen on the wall. We waited in tense silence until a knock at the door announced Patricia's arrival. She entered confidently, but faltered slightly upon seeing me seated beside Frank. "You wanted to see me, Dr. Warner." Her voice was controlled, professional. "Yes, Patricia. Please have a seat. We're waiting for Raymond and Diane from HR to join us." Patricia sat stiffly in the chair furthest from me, her eyes darting between Warner and Frank, clearly trying to assess the situation. Minutes later, Raymond arrived, followed closely by Diane Hughes. "Thank you all for coming," Warner began once everyone was seated. "We have a serious situation that requires immediate attention. Mr. Mitchell has uncovered evidence of misconduct related to yesterday's safety inspection findings." Patricia's back straightened. "What kind of misconduct?" "Evidence tampering and deliberate sabotage," Warner replied bluntly. "Frank, please proceed with your presentation." Frank walked everyone through the evidence methodically and dispassionately. As the presentation continued, I watched Patricia's face grow increasingly pale while Raymond began to fidget nervously. When Frank showed the footage of them entering the lab after hours, Patricia interrupted. "This proves nothing. I often work late, as does Raymond. There's nothing unusual about us being in the lab." Perhaps Frank acknowledged. But when combined with the chemical analysis showing the exact match to Raymond's project materials and the system logs showing he withdrew excess amounts of that specific solvent just hours earlier, a clear pattern emerges. "This is ridiculous," Raymond blurted out, his composure cracking. "You can't possibly believe we would do something so unprofessional." Actually came a new voice from the doorway. I find it entirely believable. Diana Morgan stood in the entrance, an imposing presence despite her small stature. In her early 60s, with steel-gray hair cut in a precise bob and piercing blue eyes, she commanded attention immediately. "Dr. Morgan Warner," said, standing, "thank you for coming. When I hear that someone may be compromising the safety protocols I personally helped establish, I make it a priority," she replied, taking a seat at the head of the table. "Please continue, Mr. Mitchell." Frank resumed the presentation, adding one final piece I hadn't seen yet. A chemical analysis report showing trace residue of the same substances on a pair of nitrile gloves found in the trash bin near Raymond's workspace. "The safety team recovered these during their standard waste audit," Frank explained. "They match Raymond's assigned size and contain residue matching both the liquid and powder found in Miss Turner's drawer." Raymond's face drained of color. He glanced at Patricia, who maintained her composed facade, though her knuckles were white where she gripped her armrest. Diana Morgan surveyed the room, her gaze finally settling on Patricia and Raymond. "Do either of you have an explanation for this evidence?" Patricia attempted damage control. "There could be innocent explanations for all of this. Raymond works with these chemicals regularly. Cross-contamination happens in lab environments. And your presence in the lab after hours, specifically near Miss Turner's workspace," Diana pressed. "I was reviewing project materials," Patricia insisted. "Raymond was assisting me." Raymond, however, was crumbling under the pressure. "It wasn't my idea," he suddenly burst out. "I just did what I was told." Patricia's head snapped toward him, eyes wide with fury and betrayal. "Raymond." "She said it would just be a minor violation," Raymond continued desperately, something to cast doubt on Alyssa's attention to detail. "I didn't know she was planning to use such dangerous materials." The room fell silent. Patricia's carefully constructed defense collapsed in an instant. "Miss Reynolds," Diana said, her voice like ice, "do you deny these allegations?" Patricia's jaw worked silently for a moment before she found her voice. "The Bristol project was supposed to be mine. I've been with this company for 15 years. I've earned it." She jabbed a finger toward me, "has been here 5 minutes," and Warner was ready to hand it to her. 5 years, I corrected quietly. "And I earned that consideration through my work." "Your work," Patricia scoffed. "You think you're so special, so perfect, always following every rule, making the rest of us look bad. Do you know what it's like to work twice as long for half the recognition?" "That's enough," Diana cut in. "Diane, please escort Patricia and Raymond to separate conference rooms. They are to have no contact with each other or anyone else until we determine next steps. Also, their system access should be revoked immediately." Diane Hughes nodded, picking up her phone to arrange security assistance. "This is outrageous," Patricia protested, but her words held no power now. "You can't treat me this way after everything I've done for this company." "What you've done," Diana replied evenly, "is violate our most fundamental safety protocols and attempt to sabotage a colleague's career. I assure you we can and will take appropriate action." As Patricia and Raymond were led away, Diana turned to me. "Miss Turner, on behalf of Meridian Labs, I offer my sincere apology. Your reputation and position will be fully restored, effective immediately." "Thank you," I said, still processing the rapid turn of events. "In fact," Diana continued, "given your evident commitment to safety and integrity, I'd like to discuss an expanded role for you once this situation is resolved." Warner looked at her in surprise. "The Bristol project, and perhaps more," Diana replied. "We clearly need stronger oversight of our safety culture. Miss Turner has demonstrated she values those principles even when facing personal risk." I took a deep breath, recognizing an opportunity to advocate for meaningful change. "If I may, Dr. Morgan, this incident has highlighted some vulnerabilities in our systems. The fact that materials could be moved without verification, that after-hours access isn't monitored more closely. These are issues that affect everyone's safety." Diana nodded thoughtfully. "Valid points. What would you recommend?" "A complete review of our safety protocols and reporting structures, greater transparency in project assignments, and perhaps most importantly, a culture where raising concerns about possible misconduct is encouraged, not punished." "Bold suggestions," Diana said, but I detected approval in her tone. "Mr. Mitchell, your thoughts?" Frank had been quietly observing. "I agree with Miss Turner. This incident revealed systemic weaknesses. With your permission, I'd like to work with her on developing enhanced security and safety integration." "Make it happen," Diana instructed, standing to signal the meeting's end. "Thomas, we'll need to address the department about these events. And Mr. Mitchell, please ensure all evidence is properly documented for the disciplinary proceedings." As the meeting dispersed, I remained seated, still processing everything that had happened. Frank paused before leaving. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "it took courage to come forward. Most people would have accepted the suspension and waited it out." "I couldn't let them win," I replied simply. He nodded with respect. "The truth matters. Not everyone remembers that." After everyone had left, Warner approached me. "Alyssa, when you're ready, I'd like you to join me in addressing the department. Your colleagues should hear directly from you." I agreed, and an hour later stood beside Warner as he explained the situation to the assembled research staff. The shock on their faces mirrored my own initial disbelief. Eleanor caught my eye from the front row, giving me a subtle thumbs up that brought the first genuine smile to my face in days. When Warner invited me to speak, I kept my message simple. What happened yesterday was a betrayal not just of me, but of everything Meridian Labs stands for: safety, integrity, and scientific excellence. I'm grateful for those who helped uncover the truth, and I look forward to working with all of you to strengthen our commitment to those values. As the meeting concluded, colleagues approached to offer support and apologies for doubting me. Eleanor engulfed me in a hug, whispering, "I told you it would all work out." "You were right," I admitted. "I just didn't expect it to happen quite this dramatically." "Some people crash and burn," she replied with a grin. Patricia and Raymond went down in flames. Later that afternoon, I learned that both had been terminated immediately and that Meridian would be pursuing legal action regarding the safety violations. Diana Morgan personally invited me to lead not only my portion of the Bristol project, but also a new initiative on safety culture improvement. As I finally left the building that evening, exhausted but vindicated, Frank Mitchell walked me to my car. "You know," he said, "in my police days I saw a lot of people get away with things they shouldn't have. It's nice when justice actually works out. I couldn't have done it without your help," I told him sincerely. "You had the courage to speak up," he replied. "That's rarer than you might think. Remember that going forward in your new leadership role." I nodded, taking his words to heart. What had begun as the worst day of my career had transformed into an unexpected new beginning. Sometimes I reflected, you have to go through the darkness to find your true strength. 1 year has passed since that fateful safety inspection that nearly destroyed my career. The calendar reminder popped up on my phone this morning, anniversary of the incident, as Eleanor and I jokingly call it now. Sitting in my new office with its glass walls overlooking the research floor, I took a moment to reflect on how much had changed. After Patricia and Raymond's departure, Meridian underwent a transformation. Diana Morgan used the incident as a catalyst for company-wide reforms. The Bristol project was not only successful, but exceeded client expectations, leading to a 5-year contract extension. But more importantly, our safety culture underwent a complete revolution. My dual role as Bristol project lead and newly created safety culture director kept me busier than I'd ever been, but the work was deeply satisfying. With Frank Mitchell's partnership, we implemented a comprehensive overhaul of security and safety integration. Badge access now created digital footprints that were regularly monitored. Security cameras were installed in more locations, with clear policies about privacy and usage. Chemical tracking became automated with dual verification requirements. But the most significant change wasn't technological, it was cultural. We established anonymous reporting channels and recognition programs for safety innovations. The old competitive atmosphere gradually shifted toward collaborative problem-solving. When a junior researcher discovered and reported a potential hazard last month, instead of hiding it for fear of repercussions, he was publicly commended. Thomas Warner had been my steadfast ally throughout this transition. Though initially shaken by Patricia's betrayal, someone he had trusted for years, he channeled that disappointment into supporting the new initiatives. Just last week, he announced his plan to retire next year and hinted strongly that I should consider applying for his position. Eleanor remained my closest friend at Meridian, though her role had evolved too. Her straightforward communication style made her the perfect choice to lead our new transparent communications program. "I just tell people when they're being idiots," she explained, with characteristic bluntness. "Now I get paid extra for it." Frank Mitchell and I developed an unexpected friendship. Our weekly security and safety meetings often extended into discussions about everything from mystery novels to hiking trails. He'd recently begun teaching me basic self-defense. "Just in case anyone else tries to mess with you," he'd said with his rare smile. As for Patricia and Raymond, their stories took different paths. Raymond cooperated fully with the investigation, revealing details of Patricia's elaborate scheme in exchange for leniency. He received probation and community service, and last I heard was working at a small environmental testing lab across the country. Patricia faced more serious consequences. The deliberate mishandling of hazardous materials resulted in criminal charges. She was sentenced to 18 months in prison, though she served only 8 before being released on parole. The industry blacklisted her, her reputation and career destroyed by her own actions. Sometimes I wondered if I should feel sympathy for her. After all, she had worked hard throughout her career, only to watch younger colleagues advance while she stagnated. But then I remembered the calculated cruelty of her plan, how she had been willing to risk not only my career, but potentially the safety of everyone in that lab. and any compassion evaporated. We all face disappointments. How we respond to them reveals our true character. In the aftermath, I struggled with trust issues. For months, I double-checked everything, questioned colleagues' motives, and kept people at a distance. The betrayal had left deeper wounds than I initially realized. It was Barbara Lawrence, of all people, who helped me begin to heal. "I've been doing safety inspections for 25 years, she told me over coffee one day. "You know what I've learned. Most people are trying to do the right thing most of the time. Don't let one bad experience poison you against everyone else." She was right, of course. The path to healing wasn't about forgetting what happened, but about not allowing it to define my future interactions. Gradually, I learned to trust again, to collaborate openly, to mentor new researchers, without fear they might betray me. The experience changed me in other ways, too. I became more assertive, more willing to speak up when things didn't seem right. I developed a reputation as someone who would listen to concerns no matter how small. And I found myself becoming a champion for others who felt marginalized or overlooked, remembering how it felt to stand alone against those with power and influence. This morning, Diana Morgan called me into her office. She's still as formidable as ever, though rumors of her eventual retirement have begun circulating. "1 year ago, we had a crisis," she said without preamble. "Today, we have one of the strongest safety cultures in the industry. That's not a coincidence." "Thank you," I replied, accepting the rare compliment. "I don't give praise lightly, Alyssa. You turned a personal setback into institutional improvement. That's the mark of a true leader." As I left her office, I thought about how differently things could have turned out. If I had simply accepted the suspension, waited passively for the investigation, I might still have my job, but Patricia and Raymond would have won. The safety issues would have remained unaddressed. The toxic culture would have persisted. Sometimes justice requires us to stand up and fight for it, even when the easier path is to stay silent. It requires courage to speak truth, to power, to challenge those who abuse their positions, to insist on accountability. But that courage changes not just our own lives, but the lives of everyone around us. A few days ago, a new researcher stopped me in the hallway. "I just wanted to thank you," she said shyly. "I heard about what happened last year and how you stood up for yourself. It makes me feel safer knowing that's the kind of place this is now, where the truth matters and people look out for each other." Her words meant more than any promotion or recognition ever could, because in the end, that's the true measure of our impact. Not titles or accolades, but how we change the environments we inhabit, how we make things better for those who come after us. The greatest lesson I've learned through all of this is that integrity isn't just a personal value, it's a force for change. When we refuse to be victimized, when we insist on truth and accountability, we create ripples that extend far beyond our individual circumstances. What began as a fight to save my own career transformed into something much larger: a safer workplace, a healthier culture, and perhaps most importantly, a template for how to stand up against injustice. Have you ever faced a situation where you had to stand up for yourself against unfair treatment? What gave you the courage to speak up, or what held you back? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more workplace justice stories. Share this with someone who might need encouragement to stand up for themselves right now. Remember, sometimes the most difficult moments in our lives become the catalyst for our greatest growth and positive change. Thank you for listening to my story.